Good morning everybody, welcome to IndyCar. I'm Gordon Ross and today it's the 8th of April and well we know a few things that we didn't know yesterday, but basically the situation with Brexit hasn't really changed very much. The Tories and the Labour Party are still having what seem to be fruitless meetings to make compromises which aren't being made to a Brexit deal which can't be changed. So as it stands at the moment, by Friday this week, if we're no further on, then we will actually just leave the European Union empty-handed without any kind of future deal and without any exit arrangements. But in the meantime, I was just going to ask a question this morning. What happens if there's a long Brexit delay? The likelihood is that if Mrs May can't make any forward progress this week, that she'll go to Europe asking for a short delay, which is likely to be refused because another short delay wouldn't be in the interests of the European Union's stability, and it would stretch the patience of the remaining 27 countries, I think, to breaking point. So what's probably likely, and most experts seem to agree, is that the European Union will not offer another short extension, but will offer a longer period of extension, and possibly as much as a year, for the British government to have a breathing space and British politicians to sit down and seriously discuss how to move the whole thing forwards. The question in my mind and in other people's minds in Scotland is, how will that affect the progressive move towards Scotland ending the union with England? And that is a big question, because there are a number of things which still might or might not happen, not least of which is the European elections, which are looming in May, towards the end of May. So if we are in the European Union for another year, we would then be in position to actually fight those European elections, which would mean electing new members of the European Parliament to represent Scotland and England, Northern Ireland and Wales. Now, at the moment, we still have, believe it or not, a UKIP MEP for Scotland whose existence still defies rational explanation. I'm talking here about David Coburn, and it's my earnest hope that if we do end up in the European Union for another year, that we take that man out of contention, that we remove him from his seat and replace him with an SNP or at least an independent Scottish MEP, so that we have some balance in the European Union. We don't have a cuckoo in the European nest who's basically trying to destroy Scotland's reputation in that chamber. So that's one thing. Then there's also the possibility that if there's a year's extension, there might also be a general election. But I think from the evidence that we've seen so far from Theresa May, that she is not budging, and she's not going to give in to Labour pressure to call another general election, despite the fact that Labour could still put forward a motion of no confidence and put it to the House of Commons. The question is, would it win or would it not? And I suspect at the moment that people in the Commons want Mrs May to continue doing what she's doing, which is basically stonewalling and trying to protract the whole process out as long as possible. Which brings me back to the question of how does this affect Scotland's moves towards the next Scottish referendum on ending the Union. And the question is largely, what do we do with that time if we have a year? Let's assume that we have a year, we've had the European elections and we've managed to elect more Scottish pro-independence members of Parliament in the European Union. There are some major advantages to Scotland staying in the European Union whilst we are progressing towards ending the Union. And when you boil it down quite simply, if you think about this logically for a second, if Scotland has a year to prepare for its referendum, and it has the time to explain to people why independence this time around is actually going to be a realistic option. Remember that we now have things this time that we didn't have in 2014. For example, we now have, pardon me, we have an investment bank. We now have a benefits agency, which is actually giving benefits at the moment. All right, it's on a small scale, but we have it. We have a tax system. We have a tax office, which we've always had. But that will continue as well. We have the institutions of government expanding in all directions at the moment. We also now have an office of the United Nations and an office of the European Union opening in Edinburgh. Now that is a sign from outside of Scotland that the rest of the world is expecting us to end the union with England, rather than be dragged out of the European Union against our will. Now that sends an interesting signal to me, anyway, I don't know about you, but it sends a message to me which says that the European Union, although it can't do anything at the moment to help Scotland, if we manage to end the union with England whilst we're still inside the European Union, that would mean that Scotland could get the help it needs from the European Union and the backing it needs to negotiate a settlement with England. Yesterday's show, you might have heard me saying that paperwork and documents that have been brought to my attention appear to suggest that the European Union would treat Scotland and England with equal status if Scotland ended the union. If that's true, then Scotland, you would expect, having decided to end the union with England, should then get the full backing of the remaining European Union countries, including Ireland, incidentally, should back Scotland to the hilt. And with the full weight of the European Union behind Scotland, because we would still be members of the European Union, and with England having decided it wanted to leave the EU and being very anti-European, I would then expect our friends in the EU to very much rally around us and to give us the full support we need, both financially and politically, and within the international legal frameworks, for us to have the full weight of the European Union behind us when we negotiate our settlement with England. Because at the time when we did this in 2014, we had nobody on our side. The European Union was very much against Scotland ending the union with England last time. But now the situation is reversed. England is anti-European and wanting to leave Europe. Scotland is pro-European and wanting to stay in Europe. And that completely changes the landscape as far as the European Union is concerned. They now see Scotland as a replacement for the United Kingdom. In other words, they see us taking the seats that will be vacated when England has left the European Union and Scotland has ended its union with England. So things are improving for us on an almost daily basis. The problem we have now, or not the problem, but the task we have now, is to convince the remaining doubters, if there are any. I don't think there are that many, but to convert as many people who voted no last time to voting yes now, in order to save their jobs, their companies, to save their currency from plunging, to save their medicines that they rely on, and their food supply, and generally the stability of Scotland and its massive exporting success, to keep all of that. The European Union would love us to be in the European Union. They want us to stay. Scotland is the most successful part of the United Kingdom in terms of its international trade. The rest of the United Kingdom cannot hold a candle to us. So as far as Europe is concerned, if Scotland is still in the European Union at the point when it separates or ends its union with England, then the EU will ride to our assistance, I believe, because we will still be Europeans and pro-Europeans as well. I can't see the European Union saying to us, well, you're going to have to rejoin the EU, because we won't have left it. It will be England that's planning to leave it. Scotland will be, I think, backed to the hilt, because we have no intention of leaving Europe whatsoever, and a majority of us have voted to stay in. And believe me, the European Union knows that. They know fine well that we have no intentions of leaving. Now imagine for a moment the situation that we have our Scottish referendum on ending the Union, and it's successful. So that the Scottish people decide in a democratic ballot, completely legal ballot incidentally, and an advisory referendum that they wish to end the union with England. All that remains to happen then would be for the recall of the 59 Scottish MPs to Holyrood, to form the assembly of both parts of the Scottish Parliament, in other words, the part that sits in Westminster and the part that sits in Edinburgh, together to have a vote to accept the public vote, in other words, to ratify it, and to formally repeal the Acts of Union, the two acts, the 1707 and the 1800 Acts, both the both the Union of the Crowns and the Union of the Parliaments. And in doing that, they will end the 300-year-old forced marriage and permit Scotland to remain a European country, to completely stabilise its status as it is now. And that will leave England completely free of Scotland to do what it wants. And if what it wants is to Brexit, then that's what it can do, but we will not be a part of it. The European Union will not have to readmit Scotland into the EU because we'll still be members. We will be the, what would you call us? We will be the state that survives this. We'll be the European nation which stays European, because we won't have left yet. If we allow Brexit to happen, then Scotland coming back into the European Union would be far more difficult. And the SNP knows this, and I think that's why they've been fighting to keep us in, to give us the time we need to have our own Scottish referendum on repealing the Acts of Union. Because that's what the vote is now about. It's not independence. We are already independent. We've been independent all along. We have to stop using the word independence, and we have to start using the words repeal the Union Acts, because that is what this is now about. Scotland is already independent and it has full rights to leave the UK at any time it wishes. All it requires is a democratic mandate to do that, and that means having a vote. If the Unionist side in the Scottish ballot on independence, whatever you want to call it, or repealing the Union, if they boycott it, and believe it or not, the Tories are famous for one thing, and that's turning up to vote. It would be very difficult for them to not turn up to vote. But let's say they did, and all of the Tories decided to stay away from the referendum. That would only be 20% of the population at the most that would stay away. The rest would vote. And assuming that we get more than 50% of the electorate to say yes, then we will recall our MPs, have a grand assembly which will then decide to revoke or to repeal the Acts of Union and end the union with England, so that we can remain safe in Europe and continue unchanged. Because that's what this is about. Independence is now, ironically, the status quo. And Brexit, staying with the UK, is now the dangerous option. The situation has been completely inverted by Brexit. And because of that, the way to stay in the European Union, the way to keep safe and to keep our exports and to keep our jobs, is to stay in the EU by withdrawing from the union with England. Let England go its own way. They've decided what they want to do. That's fair enough. They made their choice. Let's allow them to do it, and let's go our own way in peace. And the European Union will help us to settle our arrangements with England, because we will have the full backing as an EU country to negotiate with England. Because we won't be negotiating on our own this time. We will be negotiating with the backing of 27 other European states, including our near neighbours Ireland, who I am certain would be delighted if Scotland decided to end its union with England. And that's really all I have to say today. I'm sure other people may have differing opinions, but as usual, contact me after the show and we will look into anything else that you have concerns about, as usual. But anyway, I'll talk to you later. Have a great day.